My husband served me divorce papers at my retirement party and laughed about my small pension. He had no idea I had a $3 million winning lottery ticket tucked away in my purse. He thought he was leaving me with nothing but my dignity. He was wrong. He wasn't even going to leave me with that. But he ended up giving me so much more. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. My name is Brenda Johnson, and for 35 years I was a school nurse. I spent my life putting bandages on scraped knees and mending the small hurts of children. This is the story of how I learned to mend my own broken heart and how I finally got the last laugh. The final bell of my career didn't sound any different from the thousands that had come before it. It was the same shrill electric buzz that had marked the end of the school day for 35 years. But for me, on that warm June afternoon in Detroit, it was a sound of profound finality. I, Brenda Johnson, was officially retired. At 65 I was tired. It was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that came from decades of comforting crying children, taking temperatures, calling parents, and dealing with the endless, thankless paperwork of the public school system. I had been a school nurse at the same elementary school since I was 30 years old. I had seen generations of families pass through my small, sterile office. I had been a constant, a quiet, steady presence in a world that was always changing. And I was proud of the life I had lived. It was a simple life, a life of service. It was, I thought, a good life. My husband, Reginald, did not agree. Reginald Johnson was a man who had spent his entire life looking over his shoulder at what other people had. He was the manager of a car rental agency at the airport, a job that gave him a uniform and a title, but not the status he so desperately craved. He was a man who polished his 10-year-old sedan with a religious fervor, who bought his suits on sale but told people they were designer, who measured his worth by the brand of watch on his wrist and the zip code of the people he knew. My life of quiet service was, to him, a source of constant, simmering resentment. He saw my school nurse's salary not as an honest living, but as a barrier to the life of luxury he felt he was owed. "Just a school nurse," he'd say, the words dripping with a faint, polite contempt. "Brenda, you could have been so much more." I was on my way home from that final day of work, a box of my personal belongings on the passenger seat of my car, when I stopped at the little convenience store on the corner of our street. It was a Friday, and for 20 years I had a small, private ritual. I would buy a single lottery ticket. It was a silly thing, $1 worth of fantasy. I never expected to win. It was just a quiet little habit, a moment to dream of a different kind of life, a life where money wasn't a source of tension, a life where Reginald might finally be content. That night the house was quiet. Reginald was out at a business dinner, he'd said. I made myself a simple dinner and sat in the living room, the silence of my new, unstructured life feeling both liberating and a little daunting. I remembered the lottery ticket still tucked in my purse. I pulled it out and turned on the television just in time for the evening drawing. I didn't pay much attention at first. I just idly matched the numbers as they were called, a familiar, mindless routine. The first number, 8. I looked down. I had an 8. A small smile. The second, 15. My ticket had a 15. The third, 22. I sat up a little straighter. 22. My heart gave a little flutter. The fourth number, 36. My hand started to shake. 36. This was impossible. The fifth, 44. I stared at the ticket, my breath caught in my throat. 44. I had all 5. And the final number, the mega ball. The announcer's voice was cheerful, oblivious. And the mega ball is 11. I looked down at the ticket. At the small red number printed at the very end. 11. I had it. I had them all. The room went silent except for the roaring in my ears. I looked at the ticket, then at the screen, then back at the ticket. It couldn't be real. People like me, school nurses from Detroit with sensible shoes and a paid-off mortgage, we didn't win the lottery. It was a statistical impossibility. My hands trembling so hard I could barely dial, I called the one person in the world I knew would understand. My older sister Sharon. Sharon Davis was a retired city clerk, a woman who was as sharp and no-nonsense as I was quiet and patient. She was my opposite, my protector, my best friend. And she had never, not for one single day in 40 years, trusted Reginald. "Brenda," she answered, her voice warm. "How was the last day?" "Sharon," I whispered, my voice a strangled, unfamiliar sound. I think I think I just won the lottery. I told her the numbers. I could hear her scratching them down on a piece of paper. I heard the rustle of the newspaper as she checked them. There was a long, profound silence on the other end of the line. "Brenda," she finally said, her voice low and serious, completely devoid of its usual cheerful chatter. "Are you sitting down?" "Yes," I said. "The jackpot tonight was $3 million, she said, her voice steady. "And there was one winning ticket. Sold in Detroit." The words hung in the air between us. $3 million. It was a number so vast, so life-altering it felt like a fiction. "Oh my God," I breathed. "I have to tell Reggie." "No," the word from Sharon was sharp, cold, and absolute. "You listen to me, Brenda Johnson. You do not say one single word about this to that man. Not one word. Do you understand me?" "But he's my husband," I stammered, the force of habit of 40 years of marriage still strong. "He is a greedy, dissatisfied man who has spent 40 years making you feel small because you weren't rich enough for him," she shot back, her voice fierce with a protective anger. "This money is a blessing, Brenda. And you are not going to let him turn it into a curse. You're going to sign the back of that ticket right now. Then you're going to put it somewhere safe. And you're going to tell no one. Not until we figure out the right way to handle this. Promise me." I promised. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, clear understanding of what Sharon was saying. He was right. This money, this incredible, impossible gift, was a secret. A secret I had to keep most of all from the man who shared my bed. I signed the back of the ticket, my signature shaky but legible. I tucked it into the hidden pocket of my old jewelry box, underneath a string of my mother's pearls. $3 million resting in the dark. My retirement party was the next night. I went to sleep that night a secret millionaire, my mind reeling with the possibilities. I had no idea that my husband had a secret of his own. A secret that was about to be revealed in the most cruel and public way imaginable. A secret that would make my own feel not like a betrayal but like a shield. A weapon. A gift from an avenging angel. The fellowship hall of our church was a place I had always associated with warmth and community. It was where we held potlucks, bake sales, and Sunday school classes. It was a room filled with the echoes of laughter and prayer. For my retirement party, the ladies from the church auxiliary had outdone themselves. They had decorated with crepe paper streamers in the school's colors, set out trays of homemade sandwiches and cookies, and a large sheet cake with the words, "Happy Retirement, Mrs. Johnson," written in cheerful blue icing. The room was filled with the faces of my life. Teachers I had worked with for decades, parents of children I had cared for, my friends from the neighborhood, and my big sister Sharon, who stood by my side like a guardian angel, her eyes sharp and watchful. It was a simple, heartfelt celebration, a perfect reflection of the life I had lived. I felt a deep, quiet sense of gratitude. And then an hour late, Reginald arrived. He didn't come alone. On his arm was a woman I had never seen before. She was in her early 40s. Poured into a tight red dress that was wholly inappropriate for a church fellowship hall on a Saturday afternoon. Her heels were too high, her perfume was too strong, and her laughter was too loud. She looked around the room with an expression of barely concealed amusement, as if she were a tourist visiting a quaint but backward village. Reginald, looking proud as a peacock, steered her through the crowd towards me. "Brenda, darling," he said, his voice booming with a false bonhomie. "I'd like you to meet my new business partner, Tiffany Monroe." Tiffany gave me a lazy, dismissive smile, her eyes flicking over my simple dress with a look of disdain. "So you're the famous school nurse," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach her eyes. "Reggie has told me so much about you." Reggie. No one called him Reggie except for her, it seemed. Sharon stepped forward slightly, her posture stiff with disapproval. I just stood there, a plate of cake in my hand, and felt a cold knot of dread form in the pit of my stomach. This was not a business partner. This was something else. They didn't mingle. They held court in a corner of the room, Reginald talking loudly about a big deal he was about to close, Tiffany laughing at all his jokes, occasionally touching his arm in a way that was far too intimate for a business relationship. They were putting on a show, and I was beginning to realize that the entire party was their stage. After my former principal had given a lovely, heartfelt speech, and the children's choir had sung a song for me, Reginald strode to the front of the room and took the microphone. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, his voice smooth as silk, I'd just like to say a few words about my wife, Brenda." A hush fell over the room. I stood there, a small, hopeful part of my heart thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was going to say something kind. That he was going to acknowledge our 40 years of marriage, my 35 years of service. He started off well enough. "Brenda Johnson," he said, smiling out at the crowd. "A woman of patience. A woman of kindness. For 35 years she has dedicated her life to the children of this city. Wiping noses, taking temperatures, putting bandages on scraped knees. A noble calling, to be sure." He paused, and the tone of his voice shifted, a subtle, sharp edge creeping in. "It is a quiet life. A humble life. A life of service. And it has provided us with a quiet, humble living." He let the word humble hang in the air, twisting it into an insult. "And now," he continued, "Brenda is retiring. She is retiring with her pension. A school nurse's pension." He let out a small, condescending chuckle. "I've seen the statements. I know what we're looking at. And let me tell you, it's not much. It's a pittance. Enough for a simple life. A quiet life." The air in the room grew thick and uncomfortable. My friends were looking at each other, their smiles frozen on their faces. Sharon's hand found mine and squeezed it hard. "And I have to be honest with you all," Reginald said, his voice dropping as if he were sharing a painful secret. "I am not a man who is content with a simple life. I am a man of ambition. A man who deserves more than a life of counting pennies on a pensioner's budget." He looked directly at me then, his eyes cold, hard, and utterly devoid of any love or affection. He looked at me like I was a stranger, an obstacle, a piece of old furniture he was about to discard. "So Brenda," he said, his voice suddenly loud and clear, ringing with a triumphant cruelty, "while I wish you all the best in your retirement, I will not be sharing it with you." He reached into the inner pocket of his sharp suit jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He walked off the small stage, parting the stunned crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea, and stopped directly in front of me. In front of my sister, my friends, my pastor, my former colleagues, he thrust the envelope into my hand. "This is for you," he announced, his voice booming so that everyone could hear. "I'm divorcing you, Brenda. I refuse to be shackled to a pensioner's lifestyle for the rest of my days." The collective gasp in the room was a physical thing. My heart, which had been pounding with dread, seemed to stop altogether. The humiliation was a hot, searing wave so intense it made me dizzy. He hadn't just decided to leave me. He had chosen to do it in the most public, most cruel, most devastating way imaginable. He had turned my moment of celebration into a spectacle of my own debasement. "Good luck with your pittance," he sneered, his final words a poisoned dart aimed directly at my heart. Then he turned, took Tiffany's arm, and together, they walked out of the fellowship hall, leaving behind a scene of utter shock and devastation. I stood there, frozen, the envelope in my hand, the laughter and chatter of the party replaced by a thick, horrified silence. I was vaguely aware of Sharon moving in front of me, her body a protective shield, her voice a low, furious growl, telling people to give me space. But all I could think about was the small, folded piece of paper tucked away in my jewelry box at home. The secret blessing. The $3 million secret. He thought he was leaving me with nothing. He thought he had all the power. He thought he had just won. And in that moment of my deepest humiliation, a new feeling began to bloom in the ashes of my broken heart. It was a cold, quiet, and powerful resolve. He had no idea what a terrible, terrible mistake he had just made. The drive home from the church was a silent one. Sharon drove my car, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the familiar streets of Detroit, but seeing nothing. The scene at the party played over and over in my mind like a nightmare on a loop. Reginald's cruel smile, Tiffany's smug expression, the shocked faces of my friends, the weight of the manila envelope in my hand. When we got back to my house, the house I had shared with Reginald for 40 years, Sharon led me to the kitchen table and made me a cup of strong, sweet tea just the way my mother used to. "Okay, Brenda," she said, her voice soft but firm, the anger from the party now cooled into a focused, strategic calm. "You cry. You scream. You do whatever you need to do for the next hour. And then we make a plan." I did cry. I cried for my 40 years of marriage, for the man I thought I knew, for the public humiliation I had just endured. I cried until there were no tears left, until all that remained was a hollow, aching emptiness. And in that emptiness, A cold, hard anger began to take root. Sharon was true to her word. When my sobs had subsided, she pulled a notepad and a pen from her purse. "All right," she said, her voice all business. "First things first. That lottery ticket. Where is it?" "In my jewelry box," I whispered. "Good," she said. "It stays there. And you say nothing. Not to anyone. That is our secret weapon. He thinks you're a poor, heartbroken old woman with nothing but a small pension. We are going to let him believe that for as long as possible." Her words were a lifeline. The shame and helplessness began to recede, replaced by the first flicker of a new feeling: power. I had a secret. A $3 million secret. "He served you in public to humiliate you, Brenda," Sharon continued, her eyes flashing with a cold fire. "He wanted to make you feel small and powerless. So we are going to use his own arrogance against him. We are not going to fight him like a victim. We are going to fight him like a corporation. With strategy. And with the best damn lawyers money can buy." On Monday morning, I didn't look in the phone book for a divorce lawyer. Following Sharon's lead, we made an appointment with one of the top law firms in downtown Detroit. A firm housed in a gleaming skyscraper with views of the entire city. The kind of firm that represented CEOs and old money. We met with a lawyer named Ms. Evelyn Reed. She was a tall, elegant black woman in her 50s, dressed in a sharp impeccable. Her office was quiet, tasteful, and radiated an aura of calm, unshakable competence. I sat before her, a nervous, retired school nurse, and I told her the whole story. I told her about my 35 years of work, about Reginald's resentment, about the public humiliation at my retirement party. I laid out the facts of our modest financial life. The paid-off house, the 2 used cars, my small pension. Ms. Reed listened patiently, her expression thoughtful, her pen making occasional notes on a legal pad. When I was finished, she nodded slowly. "It's a clear case of emotional cruelty, Mrs. Johnson," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "And his attempt to shame you publicly will not play well with any judge. But he is correct that, based on these assets, it would be a straightforward, if unpleasant, division." Then I took a deep breath. "There is," I said, my voice steady, "one other asset." I told her about the lottery ticket. I told her the date I bought it. The day of my retirement, before I was served with the papers. I told her the amount. Ms. Reed's professional, calm demeanor didn't change, but I saw a new light in her eyes. A flicker of a predator that has just caught the scent of blood. "I see," she said, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across her face. "Well, Mrs. Johnson, that changes the entire nature of the game, doesn't it?" For the next hour she laid out the strategy. It was a plan of such beautiful, strategic silence that it took my breath away. "First," she said, "we establish an anonymous blind trust. The Great Lakes Opportunity Trust, or some other bland, corporate-sounding name. My firm will handle the creation of this legal entity. The trust, not Brenda Johnson, will be the official claimant of the lottery prize." She explained that this would create a legal firewall. The $3 million would be claimed from the Michigan Lottery Commission and deposited into a series of new accounts under the trust's name. There would be no public announcement with my name on it. As far as the world, and more importantly Reginald, was concerned, the prize had been claimed by an anonymous investment group. "The ticket is a marital asset as it was purchased before you were served," she clarified. "Your husband is legally entitled to a portion of it. We will not hide its existence from the court. But we will control when and how it is revealed. And we will not reveal it until we are forced to do so." The strategy was simple. Complete and total silence. "We will let Mr. Johnson and his lawyer drive the entire proceeding," Ms. Reed explained, her eyes gleaming with a strategic fire. "We will let them operate under the false assumption that the only assets on the table are the house and your pension. We will respond to their demands. We will be reasonable. We will be cooperative. And we will let his greed dictate his every move. He has already shown his hand. He believes you are destitute. We will do nothing to correct that assumption." I walked out of that gleaming office tower and onto the streets of Detroit feeling like a different woman. The heartbroken, humiliated school nurse who had walked in was gone. In her place was a client, a woman with a plan, a woman with a team of legal sharks on her side. A woman with a $3 million secret. Reginald had wanted to make me feel powerless. He had no idea that in his moment of greatest cruelty, he had handed me all the power. He had started a war thinking I was unarmed. He was about to find out that I was holding a secret weapon, and it was about to blow his entire world apart. The strategic silence had begun. The first official salvo from Reginald's lawyer came a week later. It was an email, a document dripping with the same condescending arrogance Reginald had displayed at the party. It was clear he had painted a picture of me as a simple, slightly pathetic woman who would be easily intimidated. "Dear Ms. Reed," the email began, "in the interest of resolving this unfortunate matter as amicably and swiftly as possible, my client, Mr. Reginald Johnson, is prepared to make a most generous offer to your client." I read the words over Sharon's shoulder as we sat in my kitchen. "Generous offer," Sharon scoffed. "That man wouldn't know generosity if it bit him on his pompous backside." The offer was exactly what Ms. Reed had predicted. It was a greedy overreach disguised as an act of charity. In recognition of Mrs. Johnson's long years of service and her limited income, the letter continued, "Mr. Johnson will graciously waive any claim to her school employee's pension. He wishes for her to have that security in her declining years." "Declining years?" I said, the insult stinging. "I'm 65, not 95. In exchange for this significant concession, the lawyer wrote, Mrs. Johnson will agree to sign over her half of the marital home to Mr. Johnson. This will allow him to take on the full burden of the property and its upkeep, freeing her from that responsibility." It was so transparent it was almost laughable. The house, our modest but well-kept brick home, was fully paid off. It was our single largest asset, worth a considerable amount in the current Detroit market. He wanted to trade his claim on my small monthly pension check for my half of a paid-off house. He wanted to leave me with a pittance, as he had so publicly declared, while he walked away with the lion's share of our life's work, ready to sell it and fund his new life with Tiffany. Ms. Reed's response was a model of professional restraint. She thanked them for their thoughtful proposal and respectfully declined. She then countered with a proposal that was so standard, so legally by the book, that it was a work of art. "We propose a standard and equitable 50-50 division of all known marital assets," she wrote. "This would include a full appraisal of the marital home, its subsequent sale, and an equal division of the proceeds. It would also include a valuation of Mrs. Johnson's pension, with Mr. Johnson receiving his 50% share via a qualified domestic relations order. This is the fairest and most straightforward path forward." We knew this would infuriate Reginald. The thought of me walking away with half the value of the house cash in hand would be anathema to him. He didn't just want to leave me, he wanted to leave me with nothing. He wanted to win. The reply from his lawyer came quickly. The tone had shifted from condescending to indignant. "My client is deeply offended by your counteroffer. He sees it as an act of bad faith. After his generous attempt to provide for Mrs. Johnson's future, he is shocked that she would attempt to force him from his home of 40 years. His home," Sharon said, reading the email. "He was barely in it for the last 10 years. This was the moment of truth. This was where Reginald's greed would have to make a choice. He could accept the fair offer and walk away with a decent sum of money, or he could risk it all for the chance to crush me completely. He chose to risk it all." His lawyer's final email on the matter was a declaration of war. "Given your client's unwillingness to accept a reasonable and generous settlement, we are left with no choice but to proceed to a court hearing. We will be petitioning the court for a full financial disclosure from both parties. We are confident that when the court sees the full picture of Mr. Johnson's financial burdens and Mrs. Johnson's limited assets, it will rule in favor of our original proposal." I looked at Sharon and we both broke into a smile. It was a grim, satisfying smile. "He did it," I said, a sense of disbelief washing over me. "He actually took the bait." "Of course he did," Sharon said. "A greedy fish always goes for the shiniest lure. He's so blinded by his own arrogance, so convinced that you're nothing and he's everything, that he can't see the trap he's setting for himself. His miscalculation was epic. He was so focused on my small pension, so certain that it was the only thing of value besides the house, that he was demanding we go to the one place where all secrets must be revealed, a courtroom. He thought a full financial disclosure was his ace in the hole, the move that would prove to the judge that he was the magnanimous one and I was the unreasonable one. He was demanding that I show my hand, completely unaware that I was holding a royal flush. The date for the hearing was set. The process of discovery began. Ms. Reed's office dutifully compiled all of my financial information. My pension statements, my social security benefits, my small savings account, the appraisal of the house. We sent it all to Reginald's lawyer. A complete, accurate, and truthful picture of the humble financial life of Brenda Johnson, retired school nurse. Nowhere in that file, of course, was there any mention of the Great Lakes Opportunity Trust. Nowhere was there a hint of the $3 million that was sitting quietly in a series of new bank accounts, waiting. Reginald had made his greedy overreach. He had rejected a fair settlement out of pure spite. And now he was marching confidently towards a courtroom, ready to argue his case before a judge, with no idea that he was the star witness in the trial of his own spectacular downfall. The Wayne County Family Court was a solemn, imposing place. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and quiet desperation. I sat at a long polished table beside Ms. Reed, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I wore a simple navy blue dress, the one I always wore to church on special occasions. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and humiliation had been replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. Across the aisle, Reginald was putting on a performance. He was dressed in his sharpest suit, his shoes shined to a mirror finish. He was trying to project an image of success and gravitas, a man of substance who was being inconvenienced by this tedious legal matter. Tiffany was sitting in the gallery directly behind him, her expression a mixture of boredom and smug anticipation. She was there to watch her man put his simple, unsophisticated wife in her place. The judge, a woman named Judge Maria Esposito, was known for her sharp mind and her low tolerance for nonsense. She looked over her glasses at the two parties, her expression impartial but weary, as if she had already heard every story of heartbreak and betrayal the city of Detroit had to offer. Reginald's lawyer began, his voice smooth and confident. He laid out their case exactly as we had anticipated. He spoke of Reginald's long career, his contributions to the household, his desire for a dignified retirement. He then turned his attention to me. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with a false sympathy, "my client's primary concern throughout this unfortunate process has been for the well-being of Mrs. Johnson. He is acutely aware that her retirement income is modest." He presented my pension documents to the court, highlighting the monthly figure with a flourish, as if it were a shockingly small amount. "It is for this reason," he continued, "that Mr. Johnson made his initial generous offer, to allow Mrs. Johnson to keep her entire pension, her only source of security, in exchange for the marital home. An offer she inexplicably rejected. He is not trying to leave her with nothing, Your Honor. He is trying to ensure she has something." It was a masterful performance of twisting the truth. He was painting Reginald's greed as an act of profound charity. I glanced at Judge Esposito. Her expression remained unreadable. When it was Ms. Reed's turn, she stood up, her presence filling the room with a quiet, powerful authority. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm and clear, "we do not dispute the facts as presented regarding my client's 35 years of service as a school nurse, or the modest nature of her pension. Mrs. Johnson is proud of her career and the life she has built." She paused, letting her words settle. "We also do not dispute that the marital home is a significant asset. A standard 50-50 division of these known assets would be, as we have previously proposed, the most equitable solution." Reginald smirked, whispering something to his lawyer. He thought we were just repeating the same tired argument. He thought the game was over. "However," Ms. Reed continued, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the full attention of the judge, "a full financial disclosure requires the accounting of all assets. And it has come to our attention that there is one additional significant marital asset that was not included in our initial filings, as its value was not legally secured until after the discovery period had commenced." A flicker of interest crossed Judge Esposito's face. Reginald's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of confusion. "This asset was acquired by my client on the afternoon of her retirement," Ms. Reed stated, her voice now ringing with a new clarity. "Just hours before she was so publicly served with divorce papers by her husband." She walked to the clerk and handed over a thick, professionally bound portfolio. "Your Honor, we would like to submit into evidence the certified legal documents establishing the Great Lakes Opportunity Trust, along with the official confirmation of prize winnings from the Michigan State Lottery." She turned to face Reginald, whose face had gone from confused to completely utterly ashen. "The prize," Ms. Reed announced, her voice clear and strong, each word a hammer blow, "is for $3 million. The courtroom, which had been so quiet, erupted in a collective gasp. Reginald's lawyer stared, his mouth literally hanging open. Tiffany in the gallery looked as if she had been struck by lightning. But the most glorious sight was Reginald himself. The color drained from his face. His confident, arrogant posture collapsed, and he seemed to shrink in his expensive suit. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. It was the look of a man who had just realized he had been played, that the poor, simple woman he had so casually discarded was not a pawn, but the queen. The pittance. The meager pension. The public humiliation. It all flashed in his eyes, a dawning, sickening realization of his own catastrophic mistake. He had been so certain of his superiority, so blinded by his greed, that he had never once considered the possibility that I could have a secret, a power, that he knew nothing about. Ms. Reed let the shock hang in the air for a long, delicious moment before delivering the final, elegant twist of the knife. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm and steady, "as this asset was acquired during the marriage, it is, of course, a marital asset, subject to equitable division. My client, Mrs. Johnson, has never intended to argue otherwise. She simply wishes for the court to make its ruling based on a full and now accurate accounting of the entire marital estate." She sat down. The bombshell had been detonated, and the fallout was about to rain down directly on Reginald's head. The courtroom was a tableau of stunned silence. The only sound was the frantic, whispered conversation between Reginald and his lawyer, a man who looked as if he had just been told the law of gravity had been repealed. Judge Esposito looked down from her bench, her expression no longer unreadable. It was a look of profound, undisguised disgust, and it was aimed directly at my husband. She had seen the whole, ugly picture now. The public humiliation at the retirement party. The condescending lowball offer. The arrogant rejection of a fair settlement. And now, the revelation of a secret fortune. A fortune that only came to light because of Reginald's own greedy insistence on dragging this matter into her courtroom. He had not just been cruel, he had been a fool. And Judge Esposito did not suffer fools gladly. When she finally spoke, her voice was like ice. "Mr. Johnson," she said, looking at him over the top of her glasses, "your behavior in this matter has been, to put it mildly, distasteful. You publicly shamed your wife of 40 years for her life of service and her modest income, all while she was, unbeknownst to you, a multimillionaire. The irony is so thick I could cut it with a knife." Reginald, for the first time in his life, was speechless. He just sat there, his face a pasty, sweaty gray. "The law requires an equitable division of assets," the judge continued, her voice sharp and final. "And in this case I see no reason to deviate from a strict, mathematical interpretation of that law. This court is not in the business of rewarding greed or punishing stupidity, but sometimes, the simple application of the law achieves both." She then delivered her ruling, a swift, clean execution of Reginald's dreams. The house was to be sold, the proceeds divided 50-50. My pension was to be valued, its worth to be split 50-50. And the lottery winnings, the $3 million held in the Great Lakes Opportunity Trust, were to be divided 50-50. "Mr. Johnson," the judge concluded, her eyes boring into him, "you will walk away from this marriage with approximately $1.5 million, plus your share of the other assets. You are a very wealthy man. I hope you find it sufficient. This court is adjourned." The gavel cracked and it was over. Reginald didn't move. He just sat there, a broken man. He had gotten his wish. He was no longer shackled to a pensioner's lifestyle. He was a millionaire. But he had lost. Oh, how he had lost. His plan to leave me with nothing had backfired in the most spectacular, public and humiliating way possible. He had played himself. The aftermath was swift. The story of the quiet school nurse and her greedy husband became a minor legend in the church and our community. Reginald, once so obsessed with his image, became a pariah. People would whisper and point when he walked by. He was the man who had tried to cheat his wife and had accidentally made her rich. Tiffany Monroe, the flashy business partner, disappeared from the picture almost immediately. She had signed on to be the partner of a man who was about to cash in on a house. She had not signed on to be the other woman in a messy, humiliating divorce scandal. Her interest in Reginald, it turned out, was directly proportional to his perceived net worth, and his character had just been revealed to be bankrupt. He was left alone with his money and his shame. Me. I was free. The first thing I did was take my sister Sharon to the best restaurant in Detroit. We drank champagne and laughed until our sides hurt. The second thing I did was write a large, anonymous check to the school where I had worked for 35 years, endowing a fund for underprivileged students. I sold my half of the house and never looked back. I bought a beautiful, sunny condo overlooking the river, a place with no memories of him, a place that was all mine. And then one sunny afternoon Sharon and I walked into a travel agency. I had spent my life caring for others, living a quiet, responsible life. Now it was my turn. I'd like to book a trip, I told the young woman behind the desk, a world of possibilities stretching out before me. First class. Around the world. Reginald had wanted to leave me with a pittance. He had wanted me to have a small, quiet, simple life. And in the end he got his wish. He gave me one. But it wasn't the one he had planned. It was a life of freedom, of dignity, of adventure. A life bought and paid for by his own spectacular, all-consuming greed. And every postcard I sent from Paris, from Rome, from the sun-drenched beaches of Greece, was a quiet testament to the fact that the final accounting had been settled, and I had at long last won.